Welcome to another episode of Fish and Hunt with Luke. In part 1 and part 2 of this series, I talked about deploying long lines and some of the accessories that are used in long lines. In this segment, I want to talk about the advantages and disadvantages to long lines. And if you're on the fence about using long lines or switching to long lines from single droppers, and here I have in front of me an example of a single dropper decoy. So when I talk about single droppers, that's what I'm talking about. If you're on the fence about whether to switch or not from single droppers to long lines, I'm hoping this video gives you the information you need. So let's get started. The first advantage, and most important advantage in my opinion, to using long lines is the depth versatility. And by this I mean you can set long lines in very deep water efficiently. Whereas with a single dropper, you would have to wind potentially 30, 50 feet of line onto the keel, and it takes a long time to deploy and retrieve your decoys. So, let's say for example, I'm hunting a reservoir where right off the bank it's a foot, 2 feet, 3 feet deep, and then it immediately drops off into 20, 40, 50 feet. And I want to get my decoys away from the bank. This is a situation where long lines are going to be far superior to single line decoys, or single dropper decoys, excuse me. So, again, the first advantage, being able to hunt deep water and being able to hunt open water. So if you're a sea duck hunter and you want to set up in the middle of the water body, if you hunt the Great Lakes and you're off the bank, this is going to be a far superior method to deploy decoys versus the single dropper lines. Number 2 on our advantage list is, again, ease of deployment and retrieval of these decoys. When you use long lines, it's very easy to set up. So essentially you drop a lead down to the bottom of the water you're hunting, and you can either use your motor, or as I prefer to do, because oftentimes I will be hunting by myself, I will let the wind turn the boat and begin to push the boat downstream. And as that happens, I can hook decoys on and wait a minute, let the boat go a little further, hook another one on, and I don't have to use the motor at all. So when I deploy my decoys, that's the method I use. Easy. Next, how do you retrieve the decoys? Well, that's really easy too. And this is where you're going to save most of the time versus the single dropper lines, is during the retrieval process. And all I have to do is go grab my lead line and my common line with the lead on the bottom, grab it, pull it into the boat, and then reel in the decoys. I don't even have to motor around or nothing. I could just pull the whole line towards me, unhook decoys, and put them in the bag. So that's a huge advantage when retrieving the decoys. The third advantage I'd like to talk about is the ability to relocate and into a different location. So how many times have you guys been out hunting and the ducks just don't quite want to commit to the spot you're in? They want to go 100 yards away, 200 yards away, and land on an X, on the X, a different spot, the spot you should have been in, and possibly didn't get a chance to scout. I've had this happen a ton. So I like to be able to use these long lines, and I can simply hook the long lines to the cleats on the back of my boat and drag and tow these long lines to a different location. So it gives me a lot of versatility when relocating short distances. If you want to relocate a long ways away, of course you're going to probably want to retrieve the decoys and then reset up if it's a half a mile away. So, but most of the time, if you miss a spot, you're missing it by just a little bit, and you can just see the ducks landing, and you can tow your lines over and get in the hot spot. So, the final advantage I would like to talk about is the price advantage of using long lines versus single droppers. So I'm going to go back and take a look at my single dropper decoy, and here you can see I've got starting at the bottom, I've got a lead, and then I've got a bungee, and then I have to buy crimps, and then I have to buy decoy cords, and then I have to buy depth adjusters. Yeah, that gets expensive really fast. So if you're hunting with a large spread like I like to hunt with, it's nice to be able to just buy a large bulk spool, maybe this is almost empty. I've used it all. This came in about a 600-foot roll. And just buy a large spool like this, and that way I can use it for my drop weights, for my decoys as well, and then also the common line itself. So this is going to be less expensive if you have a lot of decoys to rig up. Now let's move right into what are the disadvantages to hunting with long lines. And there's very few disadvantages that I could come up with. But the first one, and this is very much preventable, that these decoys tend to tangle once in a while. And that can be prevented by proper deployment. And usually when you do tangle them, it's because you deploy the decoys wrong, of course. So when I'm laying out my long lines, I'm really, really careful. You cross lines, which is the worst case scenario. If you have two independent long lines that you're putting out and you accidentally cross them, big mess and a lot of time. So, and that leads me right into my next disadvantage is how easily you can get wound up in these lines with the motor, and that can create a safety issue. So keep in mind that that where your motor is in comparison to the line, and if you're in a really if you're in rough water or somewhere where it's a safety consideration, you may want to find calmer water just to get the decoys out and deploy them. So, along with your boat getting tangled into the common line, you can also have your dog get tangled in these. And there is ways to prevent that, but I'm going to kind of show you the concept behind it. With a single dropper, like the one on that widgeon decoy, they run vertical. With a long line, the common line itself is often horizontal, and then subsequently the decoys will be attached to that line. And if you don't have a long enough leader on each independent decoy, and the decoy floats that line horizontal, it creates a situation where it can be dangerous for your dog, and they can get tripped up and scared, and so on and so forth. So keep an eye on that. And the last disadvantage I'd like to talk about is the unnatural look of your spread if you do not break up your spread. So in past episodes, I've talked about utilizing the drop weights as a method for breaking up the spread, and I'd like to refer you to that video if you have more questions on the drop weights and why I would use those. But essentially, you have a line of decoys, and by changing things up, that can either be hooking on several decoys and then leaving a gap and then hooking on several more decoys, or putting a drop weight in and changing the direction of the line. Those are the kind of things that help you break up that line look. But I've had, when I first started to hunt with long lines, I had a real unnatural line look. And if you get into educated birds that have seen a lot of long lines, they're just going to take one look and they're going to go away. So keep that in mind when you're setting out your spread. Is use the tips and tricks I show you in the other videos to break up the spread and get your spread to look as natural as possible. You can even drop in some single lines to break up that look. And oftentimes, and that's what I have these decoys for, like this widgeon I have in my hand, is to between my long lines, I drop in a few singles just to make it look like, hey, everything's kosher. You know, a couple of birds just came in and landed, and you're good to go. So that's the main advantages and disadvantages to hunting with long lines. If you can think of anything major that I missed, please comment in the box and let me know what you think about this video. And if you like it, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so other viewers can see these videos. I appreciate your time, and thank you.